Isabella Martinez, that's my name. I never knew my dad, but honestly, I didn't feel like I was missing out on much. Mom worked her ass off to keep food on the table and a roof over our heads. From as early as I can remember, I was helping around the house. Dishes, laundry, you name it. Mom always said, "Bella, you gotta learn to take care of yourself. The world ain't gonna do it for you." Those words stuck with me. Our apartment was small, but it was home. The sound of Mom's ancient sewing machine was the soundtrack to my childhood. She'd stay up late, mending clothes for extra cash. I'd often fall asleep to its rhythmic hum. What did I like? Computers. It started when our school got a bunch of donated PCs. Most kids used them for games, but I was fascinated by what made them tick. I'd stay after school, tinkering, learning. One day, Mr. Johnson, the IT teacher, caught me trying to install some video editing software. "What are you up to, Isabella?" he asked, eyebrow raised. I froze, thinking I was in trouble. I just wanted to learn how to edit videos. Instead of getting mad, he smiled. "Well, why didn't you say so? Let me show you a few tricks." From then on, every Tuesday and Thursday after school, Mr. Johnson would teach me the ins and outs of video editing. At home, I'd practice on our old, wheezing computer. As high school graduation approached, reality hit hard. College wasn't in the cards for me. The day after graduation, I marched into WKLP, our local TV station. The receptionist looked at me like I was crazy when I asked about job openings, but pointed me towards the HR office. 3 interviews and 1 practical test later, I had my first real job. Assistant video editor. The pay wasn't great, but it was a start. For the next 2 years, I worked my ass off. Weekdays at the station, weekends doing freelance gigs. Every penny I could spare went into my college fund. It was exhausting, but I was determined. Then, on a rare night out with Lisa and Carlos, everything changed. We were at this house party, some friend of a friend thing. That's where I met him, Ryan Thompson. He wasn't what you'd call classically handsome. Kinda nerdy, with thick-rimmed glasses and a slightly crooked smile. But when he started talking about his work in software development, his whole face lit up. I was intrigued. As the party wound down, Ryan asked for my number. I hesitated for a second, then thought, what the hell, and gave it to him. The next few months were like a whirlwind. Ryan and I started dating, and it was nice. Different from what I expected, but in a good way. One night, as we were walking home from a movie, Ryan proposed to me, and I agreed. The wedding was small but beautiful. My mom cried happy tears, and Ryan's parents, Linda and Robert, they surprised me. I'd been nervous about meeting them, given the whole wealthy family thing. But they were warm and welcoming from the start. The first 2 years of our marriage were good. Not perfect, but good. We had our own place, a cozy apartment not far from the TV station where I still worked. Ryan had his job at some big tech firm, and things were comfortable. We traveled a bit, mostly weekend trips around the country. It was more than I'd ever done growing up, and I loved every minute of it. Seeing new places, trying new foods, it was like a whole new world had opened up to me. But then, things started to change. It started with the little things. Ryan would sigh when I talked about work, or roll his eyes when I got excited about a new editing technique I'd learned. Then more. The first time he made an excuse not to take me to a work party, I didn't think much of it. "It's just a boring office thing," he said. "You wouldn't enjoy it." But then it happened again and again. One night, I overheard him on the phone with a coworker. "Yeah, just me tonight. You know how it is. Bella's not really into these kinds of events." I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. Not into these events? He'd never even given me a chance. That night, I confronted him. "Ryan, why don't you want me to come to your work events anymore?" "So you're ashamed of me?" "No, it's not that. It's just, Sometimes it's hard for you to keep up with the conversations, you know? I don't want you to feel out of place. His words stung, but a part of me wondered if he was right. Maybe I did need to step up my game. So, I made a decision. I was going to go back to school. I enrolled in night classes at the local community college, studying information technology. It was tough, balancing work and school and my marriage, but I was determined to make it work. But even as I worked my ass off to improve myself, things with Ryan kept getting worse. The cold shoulder turned into open contempt. The man I married seemed to be disappearing before my eyes, replaced by someone I barely recognized. And then came the night that changed everything. I'd just gotten home from a late class, exhausted but feeling good about acing a test. Ryan was in the living room, a glass of whiskey in his hand. "Where have you been?" he demanded. "Class, remember? I told you I had a big test tonight." He scoffed. "You're a fool and a hillbilly, Bella. And no amount of schooling is going to change that." I felt like I'd been slapped. But before I could respond, I heard a gasp from the doorway. Linda and Robert was standing there, a look of horror on their faces. Linda leaned forward, her eyes flashing. "How dare you talk to your wife like that? Ryan, we raised you better than this." "You don't understand," Ryan said, his voice rising. "Do you know how embarrassing it is to have a wife who can't even keep up with basic conversations at work events?" I flinched, but Robert's next words shocked us all into silence. "Embarrassing?" he thundered. "Let me tell you about embarrassing, boy. Your grandfather, my father, didn't have a lick of formal education. He was born in the poorest part of town, worked his fingers to the bone to give me a better life. So don't you dare sit there and act like you're some kind of aristocrat." I felt a rush of warmth towards my in-laws, but Ryan's next words froze it in its tracks. "I'll behave how I see fit," he spat. "This is my life, my marriage." After his parents left, Ryan started going away more often. "Weekend trips with friends," he'd say, not even bothering to invite me anymore. I threw myself into work and school, taking on extra weekend gigs to fill the lonely hours. Then, my mom got sick. Cancer, the doctors said. It was aggressive, and within months, she was gone. I felt lost, adrift without my anchor. Ryan was barely there, offering awkward pats on the back instead of the comfort I craved. In my grief, I found myself turning to Linda more and more. She'd call to check on me, invite me over for tea, just sit and talk with me for hours. It was the motherly comfort I desperately needed. But this only seemed to infuriate Ryan more. One night, after I'd spent the afternoon at his parents' house, he exploded. "Why are you always over there?" he yelled. "Are you trying to turn my parents against me?" I was stunned. "What? No, Ryan. I needed someone to talk to." I went to bed that night with tears in my eyes, wondering how things had gone so wrong. A few weeks later, I started feeling off. Exhausted all the time, nauseous in the mornings. At first, I chalked it up to stress and grief. But as the symptoms persisted, a different possibility started to form in my mind. I bought a pregnancy test on my way home from work one day, my heart pounding as I waited for the results. When those two lines appeared, I felt a mix of joy and terror. A baby. We were having a baby. That night, I waited nervously for Ryan to come home. When he finally walked through the door, I took a deep breath. "Ryan, we need to talk. I'm pregnant." The look on his face wasn't joy, or even surprise. It was pure fury. "Pregnant?" he spat. "Are you kidding me? We can't have a baby now. Get an abortion, Bella. That's final." I fled the apartment, tears streaming down my face. Without thinking, I found myself at Linda and Robert's doorstep. When Linda opened the door and saw my face, she immediately pulled me into a hug. Through my sobs, I told them everything. About the pregnancy, about Ryan's reaction. I've never seen Robert look so angry, or Linda so determined. "You listen to me, Isabella," Linda said, holding my face in her hands. This is your decision. If you want this baby, we'll support you every step of the way. Ryan be damned. The next few months were a blur of doctor's appointments, work, and growing tension at home. Ryan barely spoke to me, spending most of his time out with friends. I focused on my job, squirreling away every extra penny I could for the baby. One afternoon, I had a doctor's appointment to get some routine tests done. I'd taken half a day off work and was looking forward to a quiet evening at home afterward. As I pulled into our apartment complex, I noticed Ryan's car in the parking lot. Strange, he was usually at work at this hour. I climbed the stairs to our apartment, fumbling with my keys. As I opened the door, I heard Ryan's voice. "I'll be there in a minute, babe. Just grabbing my overnight bag." My heart started racing. I stepped inside, and there was Ryan, packing a suitcase. "Who were you talking to? Where are you going?" Before he could answer, I heard a car horn honk outside. Ryan cursed under his breath and grabbed his bag. "I don't have time for this. We'll talk when I get back." I followed him down to the parking lot, demanding answers. And that's when I saw her. Sitting in the passenger seat of Ryan's car was a woman. She was beautiful, with long blonde hair and perfect makeup. And she was very, very pregnant. As I stood there, frozen in shock, she got out of the car. She walked towards me with a smug smile on her face. "So, you must be Isabella," she said, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. "I'm Melissa, Ryan's girlfriend." I turned to Ryan, who couldn't even meet my eyes. "Is this true?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He nodded, still not looking at me. I felt a surge of anger and disgust. "Aren't you ashamed?" I asked Melissa, my voice shaking. "He's married. We're having a baby too." Melissa's smile turned cold. "Ashamed? No, honey, I had to fight for my happiness, and you've already lost this battle. It's not my fault you couldn't keep your man satisfied." I turned to Ryan, fury replacing my shock. "How could you do this? To me, to our baby?" He finally looked at me, his face a mask of indifference. "Come on, Bella, we both know this marriage was a mistake. I never loved you. You were convenient. A good housekeeper, someone to keep the bed warm. But Melissa, she's my soulmate. She's smart, educated. She fits into my world." Each word was like a knife in my heart. I stood there, tears streaming down my face, as Ryan got into the car with Melissa. "I'll be back on Monday to get the rest of my things," he said. "We can talk about the divorce then." As they drove away, I sank to my knees in the parking lot, my world crumbling around me. I picked up my phone with shaking hands and dialed Linda's number. When they arrived at my apartment that night, Linda took one look at my tear-stained face and pulled me into a fierce hug. I listened, numb, as Robert berated Ryan over the speakerphone. His words were sharp, cutting. "How dare you treat your wife this way," he thundered. "The woman carrying your child." Ryan's voice came through, defensive and cold. "Dad, you don't understand. Melissa is..." "Don't you dare mention that woman's name," Linda cut in. "We will never accept her, do you hear me? Never." There was a pause, then Ryan's voice, eerily calm. "Fine, I don't need your acceptance. I don't need you at all, I have Melissa now, and that's all I need." The next few months were a whirlwind. With Linda and Robert's help, I found a small apartment closer to them. The divorce proceedings were ugly, with Ryan fighting me every step of the way. But in the end, it was done. I was free of him, at least legally. When my daughter, Sophia, was born on a crisp autumn morning, it was Linda who held my hand through the labor. Robert paced the waiting room, every bit the nervous grandfather. Ryan refused to even see Sophia. When I took him to court for child support, he had the audacity to demand a paternity test. I agreed, knowing the truth. The results came back, confirming what I already knew: Sophia was his. The court ordered him to pay alimony, but I knew better than to count on his support. The years that followed were challenging, but also filled with unexpected joy. I threw myself into my studies, finally earning my degree in information technology. At work, my dedication paid off with a promotion to senior editor. But the real blessings were Linda and Robert. They embraced their role as grandparents with a fervor that sometimes brought tears to my eyes. Weekends were filled with trips to the park, family dinners, and impromptu movie nights. They were the family I'd always dreamed of, and Sophia adored them. 5 years flew by in a blur of bedtime stories, scraped knees, and proud moments. Sophia was growing into a smart, kind little girl, with her grandmother's smile and her grandfather's curiosity. Then, one ordinary Tuesday, everything changed again. Robert collapsed at home. The diagnosis was grim: advanced pancreatic cancer. The doctors gave him months, maybe weeks. I threw myself into helping Linda care for him. Work, Sophia, my own needs, everything took a back seat. Robert had been more of a father to me than my own had ever been, and I was determined to be there for him until the end. Despite our best efforts, despite the treatments and the prayers, Robert slipped away from us 3 months later. I held Linda as she wept, feeling as though I'd lost my own father. At the funeral, I stood between Linda and Sophia, our hands linked. Ryan didn't show up. I hadn't really expected him to, but his absence was a stark reminder of how far he'd fallen. As the weeks passed, Linda's health began to decline rapidly. The loss of Robert seemed to have drained her will to live. She became frail, often confused, and prone to long bouts of silence. The solution came to me that night as I lay awake, worrying. The next morning, I called my boss and arranged to work remotely. Then I packed up Sophia and our essentials and moved into Linda's house. Our new routine took some adjusting. I hired a nurse to care for Linda during the mornings while I worked on my video editing projects. In the afternoons, Sophia and I would take over. We'd read to Linda, help her with her physical therapy exercises, or simply sit and reminisce about happier times. Weeks turned into months. Linda had good days and bad days. On the good days, we'd sit in the garden, enjoying the sunshine and each other's company. On the bad days, I'd hold her hand as she cried for Robert, for the son she'd lost long before his father's death. One sunny afternoon, Sophia and I returned from a walk to find a man in a crisp business suit leaving the house. My heart raced, fearing the worst. "Linda?" I called out as we entered. "Is everything okay?" She was sitting in her favorite armchair, looking tired but composed. "Everything's fine, dear. That was just Mr. Harrison, my lawyer. I needed to discuss some legal matters with him." I nodded, not pressing for details. If Linda wanted to share, she would. "All right, how about some tea?" 3 weeks later, Linda passed away in her sleep. With shaking hands, I dialed Ryan's number. When he answered, I struggled to keep my voice steady. "Ryan, it's Isabella. Your mother passed away this morning." There was a long pause, then Ryan's voice, cold and detached. "Well, I can't say I'm surprised or particularly upset. That woman made her choices. Look, I'm not coming to the funeral. Just let me know when the will reading is scheduled." On the day of the funeral, the church was packed. Linda had touched so many lives, and it showed. As I stood at the pulpit to deliver the eulogy, with Sophia holding my hand, I looked out at the sea of faces. Friends, neighbors, colleagues, all there to say goodbye to a woman who had loved so fiercely and been loved in return. Ryan's absence was a palpable void, a reminder of the tragedy that had torn this family apart. But as I began to speak, sharing memories of Linda's kindness, her strength, her unwavering love, I realized something profound. Family isn't always about blood. Sometimes, it's about choice. And Linda had chosen to love me, to love Sophia, even when her own son had turned his back on us all. As we laid Linda to rest beside Robert, I made a silent promise. I would honor her memory by living with the same love and grace she had shown me. And I would make sure Sophia grew up knowing the incredible grandparents she had been blessed with, even if their time together had been all too brief. A few days after we laid Linda to rest, I received a call from Mr. Harrison, Linda's lawyer. Mrs. Thompson, it's time to read the will. Can you come to my office tomorrow at 10 a.m.? I've already contacted Mr. Thompson. He'll be there. The next morning, I arrived at the law office, my stomach in knots. I took a deep breath and walked in. Ryan was there with Melissa, both dressed expensively and wearing matching scowls. Melissa's eyes raked over me, her lip curling in disdain. "Let's begin," Mr. Harrison said, opening a folder. As he read, I watched Ryan's face. At first, he looked bored, then confused, and finally, as realization dawned, furious. "This can't be right," he interrupted. "Read it again." Mr. Harrison sighed. "Mr. Thompson, it's quite clear. Your mother has left all her property, including the house, to Isabella Thompson and her daughter, Sophia." Ryan rounded on me. "You," he snarled. "You manipulated my mother, you gold-digging scum. Well, enjoy it while you can. I'm kicking you out of that house today." As they stormed out, Melissa paused at the door. "You might have won this round," she hissed, "but trust me, we're not done." I sat there, shell-shocked, as Mr. Harrison explained the details of the will. It wasn't just the house. Linda had left everything to Sophia and me, her savings, her investments, everything. "She wanted to ensure you and Sophia would be taken care of," Mr. Harrison said gently. "Linda loved you both very much." Tears welled up in my eyes. Even after she was gone, Linda was still looking out for us. But Ryan was true to his word. The harassment started that very night, incessant phone calls, threats, promises to destroy me. I changed my number, but it didn't stop. Then came the intimidation. Men would approach us on the street, making vague threats about paying what we owed. Sophia was terrified, clinging to me whenever we left the house. One day, as a man was making his usual threats, I discreetly hit record on my phone. As soon as he left, I went straight to the police station. The investigation moved quickly. With my recording and testimony, along with statements from neighbors who had witnessed the harassment, the police built a solid case against Ryan. When confronted with the evidence, Ryan's hired thugs quickly turned on him, confirming he had paid them to scare us. I'll never forget the look on Ryan's face when the officer slapped the handcuffs on him. In the end, I was granted a restraining order against Ryan. He wasn't allowed within 500 feet of Sophia or me, or to contact us in any way. That night, as I tucked Sophia into bed, I looked around the room that had once been Linda's sewing room. Now it was filled with stuffed animals and children's books, a testament to the new life we were building. "Grandma and Grandpa are watching over us," Sophia mumbled sleepily, clutching the teddy bear Robert had given her on her 3rd birthday. "Yes, they are," I whispered, kissing her forehead. "And they'd be so proud of you, my brave girl." Life had finally settled into a peaceful rhythm. Sophia was thriving in school, and I had recently been promoted to deputy director at the TV station. Linda and Robert's legacy had given us security, but I was determined to build our own success. One sunny afternoon, as I left work, a familiar figure stepped out from behind a parked car. Melissa, Ryan's wife, looked nothing like the polished woman I remembered. Her hair was disheveled, her eyes red-rimmed. "Isabella, please," she said, her voice breaking. "I need your help." I tensed, ready for another confrontation, but her next words caught me off guard. "Our son is sick. He needs surgery. Please, we need money. Just half of the inheritance." "You don't need it all, do you?" Something felt off. "What's wrong with him?" I asked cautiously. Melissa's eyes darted around. It's his heart. No, his kidneys. The doctors say." As she fumbled through her explanation, I remembered our first encounter, her smug smile as she declared victory in our battle. A cold clarity washed over me. "You know, Melissa," I said calmly, "someone once told me that I had to fight for my happiness. And it looks like you've already lost this battle." Her face transformed, the mask of desperation replaced by fury. "You scum," she spat. "You owe us that money. It should have been ours." I stood my ground. I don't owe you anything. Now leave or I'm calling the police. As I walked away, her curses fading behind me, I felt a sense of closure. The last tie to my old life had been severed. That night, I made a decision. It was time for a fresh start. I sold Linda's house and bought a new one in a different neighborhood. Somewhere Ryan and Melissa wouldn't find us. Now, as I sit in our new living room, watching Sophia do her homework, I'm filled with gratitude. Gratitude for Linda and Robert, who loved us unconditionally. Gratitude for the strength I found within myself. And yes, even gratitude for the hardships that led me here.
Ever thought you knew everything about someone, only to find out their life was just the tip of an unimaginable iceberg? I used to live a life of routine, family, friends, and the occasional bump in the road. But nothing prepared me for the day my husband, Mark, vanished. His unexpected return unveiled a world of secrets, dangerous syndicates, and betrayals close to home. My family was hurled into a whirlwind adventure, making us question everything we once held true. If you're curious about how a seemingly ordinary family navigated the dark underbelly of crime, deception, and revenge, I invite you to delve into our journey. What you'll find might just change your perception of the people around you forever. My name is Anna, and this is my story. It was a crisp Tuesday morning when I woke up to find the left side of my bed cold and empty. Initially, I assumed Mark, my husband of 7 years, had woken up earlier for a jog or to get some breakfast. However, as the day wore on, I noticed his phone, wallet, and car were still in their usual spots. The unsettling feeling in my gut grew stronger. By evening, panic had completely taken over. Neither his workplace nor any of our friends or family had seen him. The kids were restless, continually asking, "Where's Daddy?" Holding back tears, I always replied with, "He must be busy. He'll be back soon." However, soon turned into weeks, and weeks turned into months. No calls, no texts, no notes, no nothing. Just pure silence. The police were of little help. With no evidence of foul play, they marked him as a voluntary missing person. My heart shattered. How could the love of my life, the father of our 3 children, leave without any explanation? Every day was a challenge. I tried to be both a mother and father to my kids, all while battling the betrayal and anger boiling inside me. How could he do this? Why? Was our love not enough? I constantly thought to myself. But amid the anger, there was a glimmer of hope, a burning desire for closure, and an inkling of revenge. If he had chosen to desert us, I wasn't about to let him forget us so easily. Fast forward to a year later. I had returned from a long day of work, kids in tow, when I found a letter on our doorstep. My heart raced as I recognized the familiar handwriting. It was from Mark. "Dear Anna, I don't expect forgiveness. I don't even know if I deserve a chance to explain myself. But if you're willing to hear me out, meet me at the old tree house we built together tomorrow evening at 5 p.m. Mark." I read the note over and over, each time feeling a mix of anger, pain, and hope. The audacity of this man to disappear for a year and then waltz back into our lives as if nothing happened. "Oh, he's going to get what's coming to him," I muttered to myself. The kids sensed something was off. "Mom, what's that? Is it from Daddy?" My eldest, Max, asked, his eyes wide with a mixture of hope and fear. I hesitated, thinking of the best way to shield them from more pain. "It's nothing, sweetheart. Just an old friend," I replied, avoiding his gaze. That night, sleep eluded me. My mind raced with different scenarios. Was he in trouble? Was he remorseful? Or was this another cruel trick? And then, there was the burning desire for revenge. The pain he inflicted on our family was immeasurable. I wanted him to feel a fraction of the anguish we had been through. As dawn broke, a plan began to form. I was going to give Mark a taste of his own medicine, make him realize the weight of his actions. But first, I needed to meet him, to hear his side of the story. The day dragged on. Every tick of the clock felt like an eternity. And as 5 p.m. approached, I was a mix of anxiety, rage, and anticipation. I left the kids with my neighbor and headed to our old treehouse. As I approached the clearing, I saw a figure standing by the tree. It was Mark, but he looked different, older, wearier. He had lost weight and had a ruggedness to him that I hadn't seen before. "Anna," he whispered as I approached, his voice filled with sorrow. "I thought you'd never come." Little did he know that I was there with a plan, a purpose, and revenge was its name. As I walked closer, Mark's eyes welled up with tears, but I was unmoved. The hollow look in his eyes did nothing to soften the stone that my heart had become. The kids' endless nights of crying, their questions about their father, the bills piling up, and my sleepless nights flashed before my eyes. "Anna, I'm so sore." I cut him off. "Sorry? You think saying sorry now will fix everything?" My voice trembled, not just with anger, but with the weight of the suppressed emotions from the past year. "Where were you, Mark? Why did you leave us?" Mark looked down, taking a deep breath. "I can't justify my actions, Anna. I made a terrible mistake, but I had my reasons." I laughed bitterly. Reasons? What possible reasons could make a man abandon his family without a word? He looked up, eyes searching mine. "It's not as simple as you think, Anna. I had no choice. I was trying to protect you all." I scoffed. "Protect us? By leaving us alone, vulnerable and broken? Some protection, that is." Mark hesitated, taking a moment to gather his thoughts. "Anna, I got involved with some dangerous people, and I became privy to information I shouldn't have known. Staying would have put you and the kids in danger. I thought distancing myself would keep you safe." Willie, a part of me wanted to believe him. The anger and pain were too overwhelming. "So you played hero and left us to fend for ourselves? You could have at least left a note, a message, something. Instead, you left a gaping hole in our lives." Mark's voice cracked. "I know, and I can never make up for it. But I'm here now, and I want to make things right." That's when my plan for revenge kicked in. "All right, Mark, you want to make things right? Here's what you're going to do." I explained my plan to him, detailing every step. I could see the dread in his eyes, but he didn't object. My revenge was simple but effective. Mark was going to experience the same loneliness, fear, and uncertainty that we had faced for the past year. For the next month, Mark would live in the treehouse, cut off from the world. No phone, no contact, no comforts. Just him and his thoughts. He would get a taste of what it felt like to be isolated, abandoned, and forgotten. Every weekend, I would visit him, not to comfort, but to remind him of the pain he had caused. That night, I left him in the treehouse with just a blanket and some canned food. As I walked away, I couldn't help but feel a pang of satisfaction. This is for the kids, I thought to myself. He needs to understand the pain he caused. Over the next few weeks, I visited Mark as planned. Each time, he looked more forlorn, more broken, the weight of his mistakes pressing down on him. But each visit also rekindled a spark, a connection we once shared. While I wanted him to feel the pain, I also found myself wrestling with the love that still lingered deep within me. One Saturday, as I approached the treehouse, I found Mark feverishly scribbling in a makeshift journal made from scraps of paper and tied together with twigs. He looked up, eyes filled with a mix of pain and determination. "Anna," he began, "I've been writing, reflecting on everything, and while this punishment is hard, it's given me time to think, to realize the gravity of my mistakes. I want to share this with you, my reflections, my regrets." His words struck a chord, and I found myself torn between my thirst for revenge and the lingering love I still felt for the man before me. The coming weeks would prove to be a journey, not just for Mark, but for me as well. The path of revenge had taken an unexpected turn, one that I hadn't foreseen. Week 5 was when things started to shift. The plan was clear: make Mark feel what we felt. But every weekend, as I climbed up to the treehouse, I was met with not just a broken man, but a transformative one. His writings painted vivid imagery of our past, our love, our dreams and hopes, all intertwined with his deepest regrets. He shared stories from his journal, and each entry was like a window into his soul. One particular entry stood out: Day 28. Every day I wake up to the chirping of birds, and as the cold seeps through my bones, I'm reminded of the warmth I willingly left behind. Anna, I dreamt of our first date last night, the laughter, the stolen glances. Waking up to this reality feels like a nightmare. I understand now, more than ever, the magnitude of my mistakes. Reading his words, the anger inside me began to dissipate, replaced by a myriad of emotions. Memories flooded back. Our first date, the birth of our children, the life we built. The weight of my revenge suddenly felt heavy on my shoulders. One evening, as I approached the treehouse, I found Mark engrossed in a sketch. He was drawing our family, using charcoal from the burnt-out logs of his small campfire. The raw emotion captured in that rudimentary artwork was palpable. "Anna," he said without looking up, "I've realized that living without you and the kids, even for this short period, is a fate worse than death. I've felt a loneliness that's deeper than the physical isolation of this treehouse." His voice trembled. "Every day, I see the kids playing in the backyard from this tiny window. Hearing their laughter, yet not being able to hold or comfort them, has been torture. But it's a pain I've earned, and a pain I needed to understand the depth of what I put you all through." My heart ached. The revenge that once felt so just and warranted now felt misguided. But there were still so many questions left unanswered. The doubts remained. Why did he get involved with these dangerous people? Why not confide in me? One day, he handed me a folded piece of paper from his journal. It was a letter addressed to those very questions. "Anna, I never meant for any of this. It started innocently, a business venture with an old college friend, but it quickly spiraled into a web of deceit and danger. They had ties to criminal syndicates, and I inadvertently became a witness to their illegal activities. I overheard plans, dangerous ones. And when they realized I knew, they threatened our family. My instinct was to protect you, but in my panic, I chose flight over fight. Every day I spent away was agony. The guilt consumed me, but the fear of those men finding you held me back. I thought staying away would keep you safe. Now, I understand it was the worst mistake of my life." Mark. As the weeks passed, my visits to the treehouse became less about reminding Mark of his errors and more about rekindling our bond. My revenge had set us on a path neither of us had expected, a path of understanding, healing, and redemption. But the journey was far from over. Mark's revelations about his entanglement with the criminal syndicate shocked me to the core. The heavy weight of fear and insecurity from the past year now had a name. But the more pressing question was, if he was willing to come back, were they still a threat? "Mark," I whispered one chilly evening, the words escaping through trembling lips. "If they're still out there, aren't we all in danger?" He gazed out from the treehouse's tiny window, his eyes scanning the shadows beyond our garden. "I've thought of that too," he admitted. "But I made sure to leave them with a strong impression that I wouldn't spill their secrets. They believe that if they leave our family alone, their operations remain safe." The very idea that we were bargaining our safety against the secrecy of a criminal empire was terrifying. But Mark had a plan. He'd had a lot of time to think, after all. I reached out to an old contact, Someone trustworthy from my college days, now in the FBI. I've sent him everything I know, anonymously, of course. If things go according to plan, they'll be rounded up soon, and we won't have to live in fear. As days turned into weeks, Mark's information began to make waves. Without revealing his identity, he had tipped off the authorities about several ongoing operations. News started trickling in about arrests and raids on syndicate hideouts. The web of crime started to unravel, and we dared to hope. But revenge has a funny way of looping back. My actions, designed to punish Mark for his absence, had unexpectedly made him a cornerstone in dismantling a criminal empire. And while we reveled in our newfound hope, we knew that the conclusion was imminent. I began to notice unfamiliar cars parked at a distance, men in sunglasses watching the house. Paranoia grew. Had they connected the dots? Was Mark's cover blown? One afternoon, as I played with the kids in the garden, an unknown number flashed on my phone. Answering it, I heard a distorted voice. "You think you can hide from us? You'll regret it." Fear clawed at me. I looked up to see Mark gazing down from the treehouse, a somber expression on his face. He had overheard the threat. But amidst the fear, a thought gnawed at me. What if we turned the tables one last time? Together, we hatched a plan. We'd bring the danger to our doorstep and confront it head-on. Using his contacts, Mark arranged for law enforcement to be on standby. And then, we baited the trap. Mark sent out a message, one that indicated he had more information that he'd release unless they backed off. The evening was tense. We fortified the house and waited. The quiet of the night was broken by the sound of approaching vehicles. Headlights flashed, silhouettes approached, and then all hell broke loose. But the syndicate didn't expect what awaited them. As they made their move, floodlights illuminated the garden, blinding them. Law enforcement agencies swooped in, catching them off guard. It was a confrontation, but it was one-sided. In the aftermath of the takedown, Mark was heralded as an unsung hero. His anonymity preserved, he played a pivotal role in bringing down a major crime ring. But that was secondary to our primary victory. Our family, once fractured and lost, was whole again. Yet, as I laid in bed that night, one burning question remained. Was our journey truly over? Or were we merely at the cusp of another adventure? Only time would tell. The next few months were a dizzying whirlwind. As a family, we took a collective decision to move, seeking anonymity in a smaller town far from our past haunts. It wasn't just about evading remnants of the syndicate, but also about starting fresh, free from the specters of our past. Life in the countryside was different, calmer. The kids adapted quickly, losing themselves in the vast fields and forests. Mark took up a teaching job in a local community college, and I started a small online business. Our once fractured lives were mending. There were moments, though, when the weight of our shared history would crash down on us, especially on quiet nights, when the howling of the wind echoed the haunting memories of our past. One evening, as Mark and I sat on our porch, watching a breathtaking sunset, a black car pulled up in our driveway. The sight immediately filled me with trepidation. Could they have found us? I thought. But then, a familiar face emerged. It was Brian, Mark's college friend and our FBI contact. "We're not fully in the clear yet," Brian began, his face grave. "Some of the syndicate's members evaded arrest, and they're regrouping. They might not know where you are now, but they're looking." Mark's face darkened. "I thought we were done with this." "We almost are," Brian reassured. "We just need something more. A final piece of evidence to put them away for good. The leader, the one truly pulling the strings, has been elusive. We believe he's overseas, but we have a lead, a meeting point where they plan to regroup." Mark's eyes narrowed. "What do you need from us?" Brian sighed. "A bait. And that bait is you, Mark. We'll ensure your safety, of course. If this works, it'll be the end. forever. I felt a shiver run down my spine. The thought of putting our family in danger again was unbearable. But there was also the promise of finality, of permanently ending the nightmare that had shadowed us. With a heavy heart, and after many discussions, Mark agreed. It was time for one last game of cat and mouse. Brian's team meticulously planned the operation, ensuring layers of protection around Mark. The chosen location was an old warehouse, and I insisted on being close, hiding in a surveillance van with Brian. The night of the operation was agonizing. From the van, I watched Mark, a lone figure, waiting. Hours dragged on, until finally a limousine pulled up. Out stepped a figure, face hidden by shadows, but the unmistakable aura of power evident. As they conversed, Brian's team prepared to strike. But suddenly, alarms blared. The warehouse was rigged. A cloud of smoke enveloped the area. Through the haze, figures clashed, shots were fired. My heart raced. Where's Mark? I thought, panic flooding me. After what felt like an eternity, the smoke cleared. Bodies lay strewn around, but Mark was standing, a bit disheveled, but alive. And beside him, handcuffed, was the syndicate leader, a face I never expected. It was Mr. Thompson, our neighbor from our old life. Brian emerged from the van, a victorious smile on his face. "We got him," he said, clasping Mark's hand. The following months saw the syndicate crumble. With their leader in custody and most of their operations exposed, they were finished. Mr. Thompson's arrest made headlines, revealing his double life as a seemingly benign neighbor and a global crime lord. Our life returned to its peaceful rhythm. The scars of our past remained but faded with time. We became local heroes, with our story of resilience and love turning into the stuff of legends in our small town. The past's shadows receded, and as we moved forward, we held on to each other tighter, knowing that together we could overcome any storm. And so, our tale comes to a close, not with an ending, but with a new beginning.
Water's good enough for poor folks, Alana, my daughter's future mother-in-law, said, laughing coarsely. I couldn't hide my discomfort at her vulgarity. Oh, could it be? Right after that, my daughter's sister-in-law-to-be, Raina, looked at me, her face turning pale. I just smiled slightly. I'm Sonia Rollins, turning 54 this year. I divorced my ex-husband when our daughter, Krista, was 3. The reason for our divorce was irreconcilable differences. He wouldn't work and spent his days drinking. No matter what I said, he never changed. Naturally, our financial situation worsened. I didn't need a family like that, so I decided to divorce him. We divorced without any child support or alimony. Since then, it's been just Krista and me. I was a housewife until the divorce. When I had to raise Krista alone, I started working desperately. I couldn't leave young Krista alone at home, so I initially took on work-from-home jobs to make ends meet. Of course, life was tough. Working from morning till night, the pay was low, leading to constant saving. There were times, a day before payday, when I ran out of money and went without food. Despite the hardships, I managed to raise Krista into adulthood. With Krista becoming a working adult, I found myself with more free time and started dedicating more time to work. Leveraging my experience in simple tasks, I began creating handmade items. This eventually turned into a successful business. There's also been a change in my personal life. Krista got engaged. Not long after Krista started working at her company, she began dating a man named Nicholas. Nicholas is Krista's boss at work and is 5 years her senior. I've seen a photo of Nicholas that Krista showed me. He seemed like a fine young man. It appears Krista has learned from her father's bad example, as Nicholas gives off a serious impression. I'm delighted with the happiness Krista has found. Now, in the latter half of my life, I've decided to live as I please. That was my thought. Then, one day, Mom, I need to talk to you about something. Krista approached me after dinner. It was unusual for Krista to come to me hesitantly like this. While thinking this, I responded to Krista. What's the rush? You seem off. What's going on? Then Krista said to me, modestly, I'm going to marry Nicholas. Really? That's wonderful. Congratulations. Since I haven't actually met Nicholas, I don't know what kind of person he is. I hoped he would be just like the person in the photo. I'm glad you feel that way, Mom. I was worried you might oppose it. Krista seemed relieved that I didn't oppose her decision. Her face clearly showed relief. Then Krista made a suggestion. So, I was hoping you could meet Nicholas this weekend. It seems Krista wanted me to meet Nicholas before they got married. Considering how serious Krista is, she probably wanted to show me Nicholas's face to put me at ease. I nodded strongly towards Krista. All right. I'll meet Nicholas. I want to see what kind of person he is. Mom, Krista said, looking happy. And so, it was decided that Nicholas and I would meet. Sunday of the following weekend. I was waiting at home for Krista and him. It was just before 11 a.m. It wouldn't be long until Krista brought Nicholas over. Then, at that moment, the doorbell rang. Yes. When I opened the door, there stood Krista and Nicholas. Nice to meet you. I'm Nicholas Friedman, engaged to Krista. Nicholas said, greeting me. I felt a bit relieved by Nicholas's politeness. Krista is my precious only daughter. I'm glad her partner is a decent person. Please come in, I said, inviting Krista and Nicholas into the house. Nicholas still seemed like a fine young man after entering our home. He brought famous brand sweets as a gift. And he shared the story of how he and Krista met with a smile. Nicholas, stop it. You're embarrassing me, Krista said, blushing, addressing Nicholas. Seeing Krista like this felt fresh to me. However, the warm atmosphere changed in the next moment. By the way, is your father at work today? Nicholas asked, looking around curiously. His expression was somewhat puzzled. I was taken aback by Nicholas's question. Glancing at Krista, she looked a bit pale. She probably hadn't told Nicholas about being raised by a single mother. Honestly, it was wrong of Krista to keep it a secret. In traditional households, single mothers often face prejudice. I braced myself to explain the situation to Nicholas. Krista might not have mentioned it, but I'm divorced and a single mother. Nicholas's face, previously smiling, went blank for a moment. What's wrong? I asked Nicholas, feeling anxious. Maybe it wasn't good for me to have told him. That's what I thought. But in the next moment, Nicholas was already smiling. It's nothing, please don't worry, he said, still smiling. Is that so? I said, tilting my head, puzzled. Despite being confused by Nicholas's change of expression, I didn't press further. After that, the marriage talks proceeded smoothly. Krista seemed to enjoy planning the wedding, asking, What kind of dress should I choose? What color do you think is good for me, Mom? With excitement. Well, maybe a color you like? I responded, but couldn't quite feel at ease. I couldn't forget Nicholas's expression from that moment. Nicholas's expression went blank. Perhaps his family has strict views on single parenthood. So, I asked Krista, what did Nicholas say on the way back that day? About us being a single mother household? Maybe Nicholas is facing opposition to marrying Krista from his parents. I asked, but Krista answered with a puzzled look. He didn't say anything special? Mom, aren't you worrying too much? Since Krista said that, I couldn't ask anymore. However, my bad feeling proved right. It happened one night. Mom. As soon as Krista returned, she called out my name. Her expression was quite dark, and I asked her in surprise. Krista, why such a gloomy face? Did something happen? Even though I asked, Krista remained silent. It was unusual for the optimistic Krista to look so troubled. After a while, Krista hesitantly began to speak. Actually, it seems Nicholas's family isn't too pleased about our marriage. Krista said, looking sad. Why? Because we're a single mother family. They think Nicholas will struggle because we're poor and from a single-parent home. That's an awful thing to say. It would be very hard to hear such things from the in-laws. I asked Krista seriously. Did Nicholas's mother say that? Krista nodded silently. I was outraged by the turn of events. Just because we're a single mother family doesn't mean they should assume we're poor. We've had our struggles, but now we live a normal life. I work as hard as any man. And then Krista told me something unbelievable. Nicholas's sister also said some things. Like what? I asked Krista. She said we're just after Nicholas's money. That it's impossible for them to accept us as family. Krista answered, looking disheartened. Her face looked incredibly lonely. Krista must have been deeply hurt by these direct comments. It's terrible that they would say such things about me without even meeting me. I can't believe Nicholas's parents. What did Nicholas say at that time? I asked Krista. And I remembered Nicholas's expression when he came to our house the other day. Maybe his expressionless face was because he imagined his family's reaction. It seems his family has quite a prejudice against single mothers. I started to worry about the future. Then Krista said, Nicholas defended me. After all, I work at the same company as Nicholas, so there's no way I'd ask for money. I felt relieved. If Nicholas is on your side, that's reassuring. I found myself saying that without thinking. If Nicholas had sided with his family instead of defending Krista, I would have been worried about her future. She would probably continue to face unpleasant remarks from his family. But if Nicholas is on her side, it felt somewhat better. A few days later, Krista suggested having a family meeting with Nicholas's family before the wedding. Mom, I want to have a family meeting with Nicholas's family before the wedding. I'm really sorry. According to Krista, it was Alana's suggestion. You should greet your fiancé's parents at least once. Your mother has that much common sense, right? She was told. Nicholas and I couldn't exactly refuse. I'm really sorry. Krista said, apologizing and being considerate of me. For Krista's marriage introduction, we are meeting with his family. Honestly, I have no idea what they might say. I don't really want to go, but it seems right to follow through with the courtesy. It's okay. I responded with my agreement. Then, the day of the marriage introduction arrived. Krista and I went to a restaurant near his parents' house. The reason for a restaurant, as Krista told me, was because Alana had said, We can't have you in our house when you're not married yet. There's a fine dining restaurant nearby, that will do, won't it? The restaurant Alana chose charges $300 per person for a course meal. I go there occasionally for business, but hardly ever privately. I was puzzled by Alana's choice of restaurant. It seems Alana had also chosen a cafe near their house for Krista's first greeting to the family. Moreover, Krista ended up paying for Alana's meal as well. According to Alana, It's only natural since you're becoming my son's wife. Apparently, Nicholas reimbursed the meal cost later. Why does Alana act so arrogantly, even though she's the one inviting us for the marriage greeting? I couldn't help but feel uncomfortable. But if I, as Krista's mother, refuse now, Krista will surely be criticized for being rude. After getting married, Krista might end up feeling uncomfortable. So, reluctantly, I accepted the proposal. Then, I put on light makeup and headed to the designated place. I usually wear full makeup for work, but I thought it best to keep it understated today. My outfit was also much more modest than usual. A flashy outfit might give them the impression that I'm extravagant. Given that we're already being accused of being after Nicholas's money, a modest outfit seemed wise. With these thoughts, Krista and I entered the upscale restaurant and were led by the staff to a private room. Upon opening the door, Nicholas and his family were there. Krista, Sonia, thank you for coming today. Nicholas greeted us politely. Thank you as well for today. I also expressed my gratitude to Nicholas. Then I faced father-in-law Kevin, mother-in-law Lana, and sister-in-law Raina. His parents and Raina smirked unpleasantly and looked down on Krista and me. It was clear at a glance that we were not welcomed by his family. I greeted them with heightened wariness. Thank you for giving us your precious time today. I'm Sonia, Krista's mother. It's a pleasure to meet you. Then Alana said with a nasty smile. I'd rather not have any further association, you know. Mom! Nicholas admonished Alana, but she didn't seem to care. Just being from a single-parent family is problematic enough. You must be struggling with money. Even your clothes are so plain. Alana scrutinized my outfit from top to bottom and said. Then she laughed mockingly. My attempt to dress modestly had backfired. Raina also hurled insults while laughing. You could have married someone decent. Poor Nicholas, stuck with a poor mother and daughter. I was irritated by Raina's comment. Such remarks were too rude for a first meeting. But I couldn't disrupt Krista's marriage. Excuse me. I reluctantly took my seat. Perhaps because I didn't retort. The in-laws looked at me as if they found me amusing. Krista looked at me with concern. Nicholas seemed a bit angry at his family's lack of manners. His brows were furrowed. Unaware of his demeanor, Alana was in high spirits. Today, we've reserved a course meal. It's $300. Alana excitedly told Raina. Really? I'm looking forward to it because the courses here are so expensive. We have to eat a lot. Raina was giddy with excitement. Kevin nodded happily as well. After a while, the staff brought the dishes. It was a colorful array of amuse-bouche. At this restaurant, 3 types of amuse-bouche are served on one plate. They all looked very delicious. But in front of me, there was only water. I was about to call the staff back, but they had already left the room. Only the water was left in front of me, a stark reminder. Nicholas looked at the scene, dumbfounded. Raina, knowing what was happening, laughed mockingly. Krista noticed it too and said with concern, Mom. Then, in the next moment, Alana laughed nastily. Poor people are fine with just water, Alana said, laughing crudely. I showed my discomfort at her vulgarity. What does this mean? I asked Alana. The in-laws had called us to this restaurant. Yet, they had no intention of hosting us properly. I was quite irritated inside. Alana glanced at me, then laughed as if she was pleased. Even though I was angry, she didn't seem to care. She seemed to enjoy it, actually. Oh? Not only are you a poor single mother, but are you also stupid? Did you really think someone worthless like you would be welcomed? Alana hurled insults at me. Kevin nodded as if it was to be expected.
Don't you feel ashamed to be a single parent? A woman who was left by her husband, you're full of flaws. A plain woman like you becomes unnecessary, right?
Kevin said, laughing crudely. It wasn't that my ex-husband left me, but Kevin's assumption was unilateral. I truly thought this was unbelievable as a human being. Raina also laughed joyfully.
I don't want to end up like Krista's mother. Working for low wages even though she's a woman. It's really pitiful without any feminine charm.
While saying this, she looked down on me. Mom. I'm sorry. Krista looked like she was about to cry. She must feel responsible for putting me in this difficult situation. Krista was looking down. I had reached my limit of patience. Being looked down upon like this, I couldn't stay quiet any longer. It might be time to fight back. At that moment,
enough already! All of you ganging up on Krista's mother. Aren't you ashamed as adults?
Nicholas yelled loudly. I was surprised that Nicholas stood up for me. Nicholas. Krista also looked surprised. Nicholas was red-faced and angry at his family. However, Alana and the others showed no remorse. Alana, still laughing joyfully, said,
There's no need to defend poor people. Why is Nicholas getting so angry?
Kevin nodded significantly. Nicholas's words seemed to have no effect on them. I could only be dumbfounded by his parents. They must lack common sense. It might be time for a counterattack. I had a last resort that would surprise the in-laws. At that moment, Raina started to look at my face. I ended up glaring at Raina. Then Raina muttered, "Oh, could it be?" Right after that, Raina looked at me and her face turned pale. It seems she finally realized who I really am. I let out a slight smile. Raina, looking at me, was trembling. No way. Noticing her reaction, Kevin asked Raina with a puzzled look.
What's wrong with you? You've been acting strange for a while.
Alana also looked at Raina, surprised.
You're as pale as a ghost. Are you feeling okay?
Alana spoke to Raina with concern. Still, Raina's trembling didn't stop. Given the truth Raina realized, it's understandable. Then Raina asked Kevin.
Dad, your company is Globe Crafts, right?
Raina looked at Kevin, seeking confirmation. Globe Crafts is a small to medium-sized enterprise with about 100 employees. The salaries aren't comparable to those of major companies. And I am familiar with Globe Crafts. The reason I know it is because it's related to my work. Kevin said with a laugh.
What's this all of a sudden? I might look like this, but I'm working hard as the sales manager.
And Kevin continued.
I used my connections to hire you as a part-time worker in our company, didn't I? Be grateful.
Kevin said, laughing. That's right. Raina's face fell, looking resigned. Kevin asked Raina, puzzled.
But why are you asking this? Are you trying to show off because this poor person is likely employed on a non-regular basis, and you work as a regular employee?
Kevin looked down on me with a disdainful gaze. This man is about to face a dire situation. I vowed in my heart. Then Raina sighed lightly and began to speak. Dad, don't you know the company's clients?
The company's clients?
Kevin asked, puzzled. Alana looked stunned. Being a housewife, she didn't seem to understand much. Raina hesitantly explained.
I've met Krista's mother before. Inside the company. She was wearing more makeup then, and I didn't recognize her right away.
Kevin seemed confused.
What do you mean inside the company?
I'm sure I remember the faces of the employees, including part-timers, but there's no older woman like that. I frowned at being called an older woman. But it seems Kevin was too preoccupied to notice, trying desperately to remember as he heard inside the company. However, I haven't spoken directly to Kevin, so it's understandable if he doesn't remember. As I thought this, Raina began to apologize.
Krista's mother! I'm really sorry for what happened.
Seeing Raina's behavior, the in-laws began to get agitated. Why apologize? There's no need to say sorry to such a poor person, Alana said.
That's right. Don't you have any pride? Apologizing to a poor person like this.
Kevin shouted at Raina. Raina glared sharply at her parents.
Dad, Mom. Krista's mother is actually very wealthy. Much more than Dad could ever be.
What did you say? Kevin glared at Raina. Being told such a thing by his own daughter must have been unexpected. Alana, too, reacted to Raina's statement with,
How could you say that?
Screaming almost hysterically. Raina said with a resigned attitude, Because Krista's mother is the president. I've served her tea in the company's reception room. You know Roland's bags, right? Kevin froze upon hearing that name. Then he turned his neck to look at me. I deliberately smiled. Kevin's face turned pale. Roland's bags. Isn't that the brand the president finally convinced for a collaboration that's supposed to happen? Then Alana screamed. Roland's bags, that's the one with bags in department stores, right? Even my bag is from there, Alana said, looking over her bag multiple times. When we entered this restaurant's private room, I noticed a familiar bag. Alana was holding it carefully under her chair. It's a breach of manners in a high-end restaurant, but it must be her favorite bag. I told Alana with a smile. That's a magazine giveaway, isn't it? I'm honored that you're using my brand. Alana's face turned red. Then she looked down, embarrassed. She must feel ashamed that her bag was recognized as a magazine giveaway. I took out my business card from my card holder. I am Sonia Rollins, the representative of Roland's Bags. The in-laws scrutinized the business card carefully.
To think you were actually the president.
Kevin was trembling as he looked at the business card. Alana looked incredulous. I watched the two staring silently at the business card and said, We were supposed to collaborate with Globe Crafts, but it seems like that collaboration won't be possible anymore. Such a shame. Hearing this, Kevin looked disturbed.
Why? That collaboration is the most important project the president has been working on. If we cancel it, our company will,
Kevin said, trembling with fear. What's going on? Alana asked Kevin, confused. The truth is, Globe Crafts is in a precarious financial situation. Compared to the past, fewer people are making handmade items. When I was young, my mother used to sew everything by hand. But now, cheap ready-made products are abundant, probably a sign of the times. Globe Crafts has been hit hard by this trend, with sales declining year by year. When Globe Crafts' president proposed the collaboration, he mentioned it was a strategy to turn around the company's dire situation. However, I have collaborated with many famous brands. So, honestly, I wasn't very interested in collaborating with a small to medium-sized enterprise like Globe Crafts. Initially, I declined the president's proposal, but eventually, I was persuaded by his enthusiasm and agreed. We decided to collaborate with Globe Crafts to make bags. But now, that's a thing of the past. Kevin was trembling. He must be terrified of what's to come. Ignoring Kevin, I quietly said, The collaboration with Globe Crafts didn't seem to offer much benefit. I was just moved by the president's enthusiasm. But a company that looks down on Krista. I stared at Kevin with a cold gaze. Kevin was sweating under my stare. Then, in the next moment, he apologized to me. What? While Alana was confused by Kevin's apology, he desperately sought my forgiveness. Krista and Nicholas were also surprised by Kevin's apology.
I'm truly sorry.
Kevin is apologizing, clearly not caring about how it looks. To me, Kevin's apology doesn't resonate at all. After all, an apology that comes only after he realizes my position is just to protect himself. There's no genuine remorse there. I spoke with a chillingly cold voice. An apology now? After you've looked down on Krista and me all this time. To think that an apology would suffice after all this. Kevin's mindset must be overly optimistic. Then, realizing that his apology wouldn't turn the situation around, Kevin quickly stood up. It was merely a performance after all. Alana, looking bewildered at me, said, "We're going to be family, so you'll forgive us, right?" She said that flippantly, looking at me. Then Alana continued, "I'm a big fan of Roland's bags. Since we're family, I'll get some products for free, right?" Alana looked at me with hopeful eyes. I was so appalled that I couldn't say anything. "Mom, that's too convenient," Nicholas said, frowning and sternly admonishing her. Even for Alana, that comment was too far beyond the pale. But Alana, seemingly not understanding, said,
Why not? There must be plenty of stock, right? It wouldn't hurt to give away a few.
Getting into a worse mood. Kevin and Raina looked at Alana with dismay. I told Alana, "Our products are not free to give away. After all, you are strangers to us." Alana looked frustrated at my words. "Krista and our Nicholas are getting married, right? So we are family. A family should provide financial support. You're the president after all." Alana said this with a straight face. After all the disdainful poor-calling, this was her attitude. She clearly had no remorse. Nicholas finally lost his patience with Alana's attitude. "Mom, you changed your attitude just because you found out Krista's mom is the president? Aren't you ashamed?" Nicholas, his face red, reproached Alana. But Alana, unfazed, laughed it off. "It doesn't matter. A president must have more money than they know what to do with, right? Share a little with us," I quietly told Alana. "Even if Krista and Nicholas get married, I have no intention of forming any ties with you." Alana, surprised, tried to cozy up to me.
Don't say that. Once Nicholas gets married, we'll be family anyway, so giving away a bag or two.
Alana was infuriating. As I was about to retort, Nicholas stepped between Alana and me. "Nicholas." When I asked, Nicholas looked troubled. I knew Sonia was the president. And I kept silent, knowing my parents would bother Sonia if they found out. Kevin looked regretful at Nicholas's confession.
You knew? If you had told me, I would have.
If you had known, you'd act just like Mom, right? Nicholas looked at Kevin with a cold gaze.
How dare you speak to your parents like that? Keep this up, and you're disowned.
Kevin shouted at Nicholas. Krista was puzzled by their exchange. Nicholas sighed and declared, "I'm fine with being disowned. I'll sever ties with you all."
Why would you say such a thing? After all we've done to raise you.
Alana, shaken, spoke to Nicholas. Kevin and Raina, stunned, stared at Nicholas. They hadn't expected him to say he'd cut ties. "I want to cherish Krista going forward. I don't need a family that disregards Krista and Sonia.
Nicholas.
Alana collapsed in tears. Kevin and Raina stood there, dumbfounded. Being disowned by their beloved son must be incredibly hard. But that's solely the responsibility of Alana and the rest of the in-laws. Live with your regrets. I'm sure you'll struggle in the future, I said, smiling lightly. Then Krista joined in with my statement.
We won't even tell you if we have children.
She said this directly to her in-laws.
Not being able to see the grandchild. Please, spare us that.
Alana cried out in agony. Amidst this, Nicholas murmured, We're done being a family. At his words, Kevin and Raina tried to cling to us with faces about to cry. Ignoring such in-laws, Krista, Nicholas, and I left the restaurant. Afterward, I heard Kevin and Raina were fired from the company. The day after the incident at the restaurant, I told the president of Globecrafts that I wanted to cancel the collaboration. The president tried to persuade me several times, but I refused. I cannot collaborate with a company that harbors individuals capable of such disdain. While I sympathized with the president's desire to save his company, I couldn't support a company that employed Kevin and his ilk. I explained the situation to the president. Then the president became furious. Apparently, the president has a daughter about Krista's age and couldn't forgive Kevin and Raina's actions. The collaboration with me was crucial for Globecrafts. Kevin and Raina had ruined such an important collaboration. It's understandable that the president couldn't forgive them. Kevin was already of age, and Raina was employed part-time through Kevin's connections. After being fired from Globecrafts, finding a new job would be very tough for them. And Alana was a housewife. She had already been cut off by Nicholas, their only breadwinner. Once, the in-laws came directly to our company to negotiate.
Please collaborate with Globecrafts. If you do, the president will rehire me. Even if not a collaboration, provide financial support. Our family is suffering, you know? Families help each other out.
They both pleaded desperately. After treating people like poor people and now suddenly claiming family, it's laughable. I made it clear. Neither collaboration nor financial support is possible. Nicholas has also severed ties with you, hasn't he? Please leave now. But the in-laws wouldn't leave.
But,
trying somehow to cling to me, I firmly told the in-laws again.
Never appear in front of me again. If I see you again, I'll call the police.
Perhaps because I mentioned the police, Kevin said.
Please, not the police. We won't come again.
And left with Alana. The in-laws' clothes were dirty. They probably weren't living well. They who had once scorned others as poor. It's purely their own fault. Apparently, Raina has since lived almost entirely shut in. Struggling to find a job and unlikely to marry. Despairing about the future, Raina barely leaves her room. Her future seems to hold nothing but despair. 3 years have passed since then. Now, Krista, Nicholas, and I live together. Ideally, as newlyweds, Krista and Nicholas should live alone. But Nicholas said, I think it's safer for Krista if she's with you in case of anything. And they decided to live with me. Nicholas, busy with work, often helps with household chores alongside Krista. I'm truly grateful. And a significant change has occurred for the three of us. One day, Krista approached me with a serious look. Mom. Worried something might have happened to Krista, I became anxious. Then, in the next moment, she smiled.
It looks like I'm going to be a mom.
Krista joyfully stroked her belly.
That's wonderful, Krista. Congratulations.
Delighted, I hugged Krista. Nicholas smiled happily beside Krista and me. I'm sure various things will happen from now on. But if it's us, we can surely overcome them. I'm also looking forward to meeting the new grandchild. Imagining our happy future, a natural smile spread across my face.
So, there I was, elbow deep in a bin of discounted scarves at Maribel's, my workplace, and practically my second home, when I first heard his voice. "Hey, is this the line for the register, or are you just guarding the best deals for yourself?" I popped my head up, a bit annoyed at first. After all, snagging the best bargains required focus. But then I saw him, James, with a crooked smile and a camera slung around his neck. "No line here," I said, standing up and straightening my blouse, a vintage find I was particularly proud of. "Just making sure none of these treasures slip away." He laughed, a nice, easy sound. "Mind if I dive in?" "I'm looking for something to jazz up a shoot. I'm a photographer." "I could tell by the camera," I said, and we both laughed. It was a straightforward conversation, nothing fancy, but it clicked right away. James had an eye for style, which I guessed came with his job. As we talked, he mentioned he was at Maribel's to pick out accessories for a fashion show shoot. I told him about my knack for putting together killer outfits from sale items and leftovers. We chatted more about fashion, photography, and our favorite spots in the city to find hidden gems. Before we knew it, an hour had passed and we were still rifling through the bins together. "You know, you should come to the fashion show this weekend," James suggested. "See what I do with these scarves you helped me pick." I hesitated for a moment. I wasn't used to getting invites to shows, usually just cleaning up after them at the store. But something about James's straightforward manner made me want to say yes. "All right, I'll come. It'll be nice to see the scarves in action instead of folded up in a bin." "Great," he said, his eyes lighting up. "It's a date then." "Well, not a date, unless you want it to be." We exchanged numbers and went our separate ways, but not before he bought a ridiculously flamboyant scarf that I had jokingly suggested. The rest of my day at Maribel's flew by. I couldn't stop thinking about how natural it felt to talk to James. It wasn't just his looks, though. Okay, he was pretty cute. It was the way he seemed genuinely interested in what I had to say. And in a world where fashion could be all about the price tag, his appreciation for my budget-savvy skills felt refreshing. The weekend couldn't come fast enough. I found myself looking forward to seeing James again and curious about the fashion show. True to his word, James met me outside the venue, his camera in hand, ready to capture the event. The show was fantastic, the models looked stunning, and the scarves we'd picked out added just the right pop of color. Afterward, James and I headed to a cozy cafe nearby to talk more over coffee. Sitting across from him, I felt a connection that was hard to ignore. We talked about everything, from our favorite bands to our shared passion for thrift shopping. James laughed at my tales of epic sale conquests. "You really have an eye for this," he said, stirring his coffee. "Ever thought of doing it professionally?" "Every day of my life," I admitted. "But it's tough to break into styling full-time without the right connections." Things moved quickly after that. Before I knew it, James was introducing me to his family. His parents were warm and welcoming, which eased my nerves a bit. His mom, Linda, hugged me right away, and his dad, Mark, was all smiles as we sat down for dinner at their place. "You have a lovely home," I complimented, genuinely impressed by the cozy decor. "Thank you, dear," Linda replied. We tried to make it welcoming. Dinner was going smoothly until Claire, James's younger sister, walked in. She was the complete opposite of the warm reception I'd received so far. Dressed to the nines, she eyed my outfit, a chic ensemble I'd snagged at a fraction of the cost, and smirked. "So, you're the girl James can't stop talking about," Claire said, her voice dripping with a mix of curiosity and disdain. "I guess I am," I responded, trying to keep the atmosphere light. Our conversation was interrupted by Mark's compliment about my outfit. "You look wonderful tonight, Elise. James tells us you're quite the bargain hunter." Proudly, I said, "Thank you. Yes, I love finding good deals." Makes fashion more fun when it's like a treasure hunt. Linda nodded in approval, but Claire just rolled her eyes. I couldn't stand wearing something so economical. I prefer the finer things in life, not leftovers from a clearance bin. Mark frowned slightly at his daughter's rudeness. Claire, you could learn a thing or two about saving from Elise here. Oh, please, Claire scoffed. I'm not about to pinch pennies and miss out on the best. Life's too short for secondhand silk. The table went quiet. I felt my cheeks burn with embarrassment. James, meanwhile, just gave Claire a weak smile and didn't say a word. It stung that he didn't stand up for me. After dinner, as we were leaving, I couldn't hold back any longer. James, why didn't you say anything? Your sister was outright rude. He sighed, a look of discomfort crossing his face. Look, Elise, I know Claire can be a bit much, but she's my sister. I have to stick by her, you know? But sticking by doesn't mean you let her walk all over me, or anyone, for that matter, I countered, frustrated. James ran his hands through his hair. It's complicated. We've always been close, and I don't want to stir up drama. Let's just ignore her comments, okay? I nodded, not quite satisfied but willing to let it go for the moment. However, deep down, I knew this was something we'd have to address sooner or later. If things were going to move forward with James, he needed to know that I wasn't just going to roll over and take that kind of treatment, not from Claire or anyone else. Things with Claire went from bad to worse after that dinner. It was like she had it out for me, finding every opportunity to dig into my lifestyle and choices. One sunny afternoon really highlighted the tension between us. I was on my way to check out a sale at a high-end boutique when I heard someone call out in a loud, mocking tone. There she goes, bargain bin queen herself. I turned to see Claire, flanked by her usual entourage, sneering at me from across the street. Her friends joined in with laughter, obviously enjoying the show. Yeah, headed to snatch up another glamorous discount? Claire added, her voice dripping with sarcasm. Keeping my composure, I responded with a calm and clear voice. Actually, yes. They've got a sale on their luxury line, half off today. You guys should check it out, it's a steal. To my surprise, Claire's friends paused, exchanging looks. One of them, a tall girl with sharp features, seemed genuinely interested. Really? Half off? That sounds like a great deal actually. Yeah, let's go see, another chimed in, and just like that, the group crossed the street towards me, leaving a fuming Claire behind. She huffed and stomped her foot, clearly not used to being ignored. But the confrontations weren't limited to the streets, they followed me to work. One particularly busy day at Maribel's, Claire strutted in, her demeanor as haughty as ever. She browsed through the racks of new arrivals, then came straight to the register where I was helping another customer. Hey, I need a favor, she said loudly, cutting off the person I was assisting. Can you give me a discount on this? She asked, holding up a sleek, expensive-looking dress from our latest collection. I'm sorry, Claire, but that's a new arrival. We don't have discounts on the latest collection, I explained, trying to keep my professional tone. Come on, Elise. We're practically family. You can make an exception, she insisted, her voice edged with entitlement. That's not how it works, Claire. I can't give discounts at my discretion, especially not on new stock. Her face turned a shade of red, and her voice rose. That's ridiculous. You're just being difficult because you don't like me. I'm going to talk to James about this. Feel free to do so, but our store policy won't change, I replied firmly, handing her back the dress. She threw the dress onto the counter and stormed out, muttering about how unhelpful I was and how she'd make sure her brother knew about my poor attitude. True to her word, James called me that evening, his tone frustrated. Elise, my sister came home really upset today. Why wouldn't you help her out? She just wanted a little discount. James, you know I work in retail. I can't just hand out discounts. It's against store policy, and it could get me in trouble, I explained, trying to keep my voice steady despite my growing annoyance. But she's my sister. Can't you just make an exception this once? he pressed. No, James, I really can't. It's my job on the line. You wouldn't want me to compromise my work, would you? I countered. We ended the conversation there, but the issue remained unresolved. The constant tug-of-war over Claire's expectations and my refusal to bend the rules was straining not just my relationship with her, but with James as well. After the discount debacle, I did my best to keep my distance from Claire, but family dinners made that nearly impossible. At each gathering, she seemed more intent on flaunting her latest conquest, a wealthy guy she'd started seeing. She'd throw around comments about the lavish lifestyle she was expecting, each one feeling like a tiny jab at my more modest ways. During one such dinner, she was bubbling over with details about her upcoming wedding plans. "Oh, you wouldn't believe the size of the diamond he's getting me. It's simply massive," she boasted, making sure everyone at the table could hear. James, sitting next to me, chimed in with genuine enthusiasm. "Yeah, sis, make sure you snag that guy before he realizes you're way out of his league." He laughed, nudging her playfully. The conversation drifted to other topics, but the undercurrent of Claire's bragging lingered. It was clear she loved the spotlight. Meanwhile, James turned to me with a softer expression once we were alone in the car. "You're quiet tonight. Everything okay?" he asked, reaching over to squeeze my hand. "I'm fine, just thinking about our own plans," I said, forcing a smile. His eyes lit up. "Speaking of which, I've been meaning to ask you." He trailed off, and I felt my heart skip a beat as he pulled a small box from his jacket pocket. "Elise, will you marry me?" he said, opening the box to reveal a beautiful, simple ring that was perfectly my style. Tears sprang to my eyes, not just from the joy of the moment, but also from relief. "Yes, James, of course, I will." We spent the next few months deep in wedding planning. I threw myself into every detail, designing the style of the celebration with a keen eye. I ordered a special wedding dress with a large bow, something unique and stunning. I sketched and planned each aspect of the decor, from the photography areas to the table settings, ensuring everything followed a cohesive, elegant theme. At home, I spread out my designs on the living room floor, poring over fabric swatches and invitation samples. James watched, impressed with my dedication. "This is going to be incredible, Elise. You have such a great eye," he said, leaning over to examine a sketch of the archway I designed. "I just want it to be perfect. I want our guests to feel as special as we will on that day," I replied, my eyes scanning the room, imagining how it would all come together. We kept all the plans and sketches in a folder at home, a folder that became more stuffed with ideas and confirmations as the days went by. Every now and then, James would flip through it, nodding approvingly at my latest additions or suggesting little tweaks. Things started to feel rushed when Claire announced her wedding date, which was suspiciously set for 2 months before mine. I couldn't help but think she was trying to upstage me. Meeting her fiancé, a polite guy from a wealthy background, I figured he didn't really know what he was getting into. He seemed nice enough, but oblivious to Claire's competitive streak. One afternoon, I was out shopping with Linda, my future mother-in-law, trying to pick out some last-minute decorations for Claire's wedding, as well as some items for my own. We decided to take a break and grabbed some coffee at a nearby cafe. Linda stirred her coffee, looking a bit distressed. "I just don't understand Claire sometimes. She's leaving everything to the last minute. It's like she doesn't care about the details at all." I nodded, sipping my own coffee. "Yeah, it's a lot to pull together a wedding." Linda gave me an awkward smile. "I hate to impose, especially with your own wedding coming up. But maybe you could give her some advice? She seems to respect your style, even if she doesn't show it." "I can try," I said, though the thought of working closely with Claire on anything filled me with dread. The opportunity came up at a family dinner later that week. The atmosphere was tense, as usual, thanks to the underlying rivalry that Claire seemed keen on fostering. During dessert, Linda brought up the topic. "Elise has been doing such a wonderful job planning her wedding," Linda began, casting a meaningful glance my way. "Maybe she could give you some tips, Claire?" Claire, who had been halfway through bragging about her honeymoon plans, paused and looked at me. Her expression was hard to read. Thanks, but no thanks, Mom. I've got it covered. Relief washed over me, and I quickly chimed in. Of course, whatever works best for you. Yeah, I want my wedding to be unique, you know? Not like anyone else's, Claire added, a bit pointedly. The conversation moved on, but the jab lingered in the air. I just shrugged. If Claire wanted to take on everything herself, that was fine by me. Less drama to deal with. As the days ticked down to Claire's wedding, I threw myself into finalizing my own plans. My days were filled with calls to vendors, fittings for my dress with the large bow that I adored, and meetings with the decorator to ensure every detail was perfect. The moment I arrived at Claire's wedding venue, my heart sank. It was like walking into a mirror image of the wedding I had been planning for months. The floral arrangements, the decor, even the small touches I'd prided myself on choosing were all there, as if lifted straight from my sketches. Can you believe this? It's all so gorgeous. Linda exclaimed, completely unaware of the origin of the designs. I barely managed a nod, my eyes scanning the setup. It was more than just resemblance, it was a carbon copy. My mind raced, trying to understand how this could have happened. Then, Claire and her fiancé made their entrance, and my breath caught in my throat. She was wearing the exact dress I had custom ordered, down to the last detail, and clutching the bouquet I had so carefully designed. The sight was a gut punch. I pulled my phone out and dialed James, my hands shaking. James, where are you? We need to talk. Now. He picked up, his voice strained. Hey, I'm at the back with the guys. What's up? How could Claire's wedding look exactly like what we planned? The decorations, her dress, even the flowers, how, James? There was a pause, a moment of silence that felt like an eternity. Elise, it's all a misunderstanding. You're overthinking it. Overthinking it? I could hardly believe what I was hearing. I needed answers, and I needed them now. Ending the call, I marched over to where Linda was standing with Claire and her groom, just as another relative was gushing about the decor. It's just stunning, Claire. The creativity here is amazing. How did you come up with all this? They asked, their voice filled with admiration. Claire glanced at me, her smile faltering for a moment before she regained her composure. Oh, you know, I've been planning this for months. Wanted to keep it a surprise. I couldn't hold back. Really, Claire? When did you start planning? Because it looks exactly like the plans I have at home. The ones I showed to James. The area went quiet. Heads turned. Claire's face turned a shade of red, but it was James's reaction that caught my attention. He hurried over, his expression pleading. Elise, let's not do this here. It's her big day, he whispered, trying to lead me away by the elbow. Ignoring his attempts, I pressed on. No, James. I want to know why my wedding, our wedding, has been replicated here today. Linda, looking between us, finally spoke up. What's going on? Elise, are you saying these are your ideas? Yes, I said firmly. Every single one of them. And the dress. That's my dress, the one I chose for our wedding. The crowd murmured, and Claire's husband looked between us, confusion written all over his face. James finally spoke, his voice calm but cold. Elise, the wedding is months away. I thought it wouldn't matter. Claire liked the ideas, and it saved money. The guests watched, some with open curiosity, others with discomfort. Linda looked devastated, her hands covering her mouth. I stood there, the weight of the betrayal sinking in. Not just Claire's, but James's, the man I was supposed to marry, who had so casually handed over my dreams to appease his sister. James, how could you think it's okay to give my wedding dress to your sister? I demanded, my voice sharp enough that it drew more eyes toward us. It's just a dress, Elise, he replied, his tone dismissive, which only fueled my anger. You can wear it again, and no one will remember by the time we have our wedding. It's not a disposable item. My shock at his response was palpable. Not disposable? That's not the point, James. It's about respect, about the promises we made to each other. How could you disrespect me like this, for her? I gestured toward Claire, who stood a few feet away, a smug smile playing on her lips. Seeing my distress, she couldn't resist gloating. I just wanted to look beautiful today, and I did. Thanks for the dress, by the way. It's nice to know I'll wear it before you do, makes it extra special, doesn't it? Her words were like a slap in the face. The crowd murmured, some in shock, others unsure of where to look. I'm not doing this, James. I can't marry someone who thinks so little of me, someone who sacrifices my happiness for his sister's whims, I said loudly, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. Before he could respond, his parents stepped forward. Linda looked heartbroken. Mark's face was set in a hard line of disapproval. James, what you did was wrong. You should have stood by Elise, not undermine her, Linda said, her voice tinged with sadness. Mark chimed in, his tone harsh. And Claire, we are ashamed of your actions. Stealing someone else's ideas, gloating about it. That's not how we raised you. Finally, the groom's parents, who had been quietly observing, spoke up, their words grave and full of disappointment. You can't start a family life based on lies, Claire's future father-in-law stated sternly. Hearing this, Claire lost any semblance of control. I don't care about any of you. I'll do what I want, she screamed at her in-laws, her voice shrill and filled with defiance. It was the last straw for her groom. He stepped up to the microphone, his voice loud and clear. I can't do this. I can't marry into deceit. He looked directly at Claire, his decision firm. I'm sorry, but there will be no wedding today. The reaction was immediate. Claire's face crumpled, and she started yelling at him, at her parents, at anyone who would listen. James, ever the peacemaker, tried to soothe her, but the damage was done. His parents looked on, dismayed and disappointed. This is all your fault, Elise. James spat out, his words laced with blame. You ruined my sister's wedding day. No, James, I said, my voice calm but cold. Claire ruined her own wedding day. And you chose not to see what was happening because you didn't want to upset her. I walked out, not looking back, the sound of arguing fading behind me. As I stepped outside, the cool air felt like a balm. I was free from the twisted loyalties and deception that had marred what should have been a joyful occasion. Breaking up with James was like ripping off a band-aid. It hurt like hell at first, but it was necessary for healing. After the disastrous end to Claire's non-wedding, I realized I couldn't just let it all slide. There were too many expenses piled up, too many plans trashed, because of what James did. So, I got myself a lawyer. The day of the hearing, the courtroom was tense. The judge called the session to order, and my lawyer laid out the case, presenting receipts, contracts, and testimony from various vendors. But the turning point came when Linda, surprisingly, agreed to testify. Her presence gave me a jolt of confidence. Linda, can you tell the court about the events leading up to the wedding that didn't happen? My lawyer asked. Yes, Linda started, her voice steady, but filled with regret. My son gave his sister the wedding dress and decorations that were meant for Elise's wedding. It was done without Elise's consent. I was very disappointed. And in your opinion, did this action directly affect Elise's decision to cancel the wedding? The lawyer continued. It did. It was the last straw for her, and honestly, I can't blame her, Linda replied, casting a sad glance my way. The judge nodded, jotting down notes. James's lawyer tried to paint it as a minor misunderstanding, but the evidence was overwhelming. After a long deliberation, the judge ruled in my favor. The court finds for the plaintiff. It is clear that the actions of the defendant led directly to the financial losses and emotional distress suffered by Ms. Elise. With the compensation I received, I did something I should have done years ago. I enrolled in a stylist course specializing in wedding fashion. The money helped me quit my job at Maribel's, giving me the freedom to focus entirely on building my dream career. Months later, my phone buzzed with appointment requests and messages from clients. My services were in demand, my ideas fresh and respected. One afternoon, while arranging some portfolios, my phone rang. It was Linda. "Elise, I just wanted to say. I just wish things could have been different, with James and everything." "Me too," I said, though part of me wasn't sure. If not for that disaster, I might never have found my true path. Hanging up, I looked around my new studio filled with fabric swatches and glowing testimonials from happy clients. I was exactly where I needed to be, doing what I loved. Sure, the road here was bumpy, but sometimes life's detours lead to the best destinations.